I figured with the end of the season rapidly approaching that I would do a video on things that I wish will be incorporated into the game in future seasons, maybe. I'm Disturbing from Middle Age Gaming, and strangely enough, actually, I was going to put music in the background of this one this time, and then I realized when I go into the here, I can only turn the music on or off. So before I even start my list, maybe music leveler, so that I can have music on but turn it down would be nice, which I can't currently do in the game. So there's my surprise addition to a preview of what's to come. Here is my actual list that I'm going to talk about today in today's video, and I'm covering these 7 things because from my experience from playing the first season so far, I've seen pretty much all of these come up from ideas from other people or from discussions or from things in other videos, and I kind of wanted to bring them all together into one video of where there is potential that's not being fully used, let's say. So let's begin with my fears about faction changing. I know this is a bit different. It almost looks like some trippy effect. But this is my fear, kind of what happened a little bit in Season 1, and I worry will happen even more in Season 2. The left side being the roleplay server, although granted there aren't 5, there's 4 and 6 depending, but whatever, I used 5 circles. And the right-hand side being the new mixed servers. And my fear here is that the server progress being 7, I think it is, to before you can switch factions, is just too long. I think, to be honest, I don't know, maybe I'll hold my hand up here. I could be a bit individual when I come to this conclusion that I think faction change should not even be a thing. If you're starting a season and you choose that faction, you should have that decision in mind. And going forward into future seasons where we shouldn't have the same, fingers crossed, we shouldn't have the same problem of huge gaps where there are factions with nobody playing inside them. When we start to merge, I don't know how many servers it's going to be, 3 or 4 servers together with those active player bases, it should be enough of a player base that every faction should have some active fellowship, some active people in, and you should be able to get a game in. Okay, one faction might end up with having 3 or 4 very good fellowships. That's going to be able to be countered by the fact that there are 10 factions in these seasons, and you can bunch up as sort of like 2 or 3 groups together to counterbalance other stronger groups. That should be it. That should be what happens in Season 2. The season progress up to 7 to change factions removes that. Because what it means is that, and I've talked about this in previous videos, when you get to server progress 5 or 6, 7, you should be keeping an idea of what's going on in the world of factions, and really if you're in a faction that's pretty small and you kind of want to win something, then you've probably got a greater chance in those factions where there's 3 or 4 super active fellowships. And naturally you are going to have those people who are going to switch boats. And on the left hand side you're going to end up with sort of like 2 or so super big larger groups, and then in the mixed factions I think you're probably going to be 2 sort of like separate entities. I'm only predicting what I think will happen, but I would predict that most people will emigrate sort of like in season progress 6 and 7 to these big groups, and you will end up with 2 or 3 or 4 very strong factions, and the rest of the factions will be, you know, mainly dead weight and just holding on to territories that they can get. So I don't know. For me, I would get rid of it all, totally, but it definitely should be finished way before progress 7, which is sort of like 3 weeks into the game. My next wish, better alliance features. I always said this from the beginning, and I've said it in videos, it would be better if you could have a free relocate at the beginning of the game. I know what people are saying, you don't want to be too close together and you will eat each other's tiles. Yeah, I don't mean like this is my base and I teleport to this tile and this tile and this tile, and it's a very small area. I mean, locate to the general vicinity, you know, sort of like within a certain area and maintaining a certain area of, you know, how the game spawns you at the beginning of the game. It just relocates you to a spawn location that's closer to that person. For me, would be better for being able to work together as a fellowship early on in the game. I know people say, oh, you want to be separate places and you want to be doing your own things. Maybe, but early game, I'd quite like to be able to hit those higher tiles and have my fellowship friends or do the content of the game work together to getting towards any sort of like places that we want to be going to. We can do that better together as a group, and that's why we're playing the game as a fellowship and starting the game as a fellowship. We want to be able to access those features early on. So it would have been nicer just to be able to give you sort of like some free locate to a general vicinity of your fellowship leader that even expires sort of like after the third day or something. So it's you can't exploit it. It's only there at the very beginning. You move in the general area and it just helps your fellowship coordinate better. A better story is essential. You can see in my list I'm up to like 1,400. I've just stopped spending them. There's not really much that I need them for. The daily tips, I don't really need them to be essentially done immediately. My XP, I've got sort of like 9 characters at 49.50. So and teleports, I've got about 7 of them. So there's just nothing in here for me to buy. I don't need more resources. So that definitely needs revamping. They need to add some more stuff to make it more interesting. And I just like a way to find my allies, in my fellowship, rather than just little tiny blue dots on the map that aren't even names. I just have to, if I want to find somebody, just keep clicking on those to at some point find where they are. It would have been easier just to have some sort of like fellowship list where you could kind of locate where everybody is at that time. Moving on to 3, an in-game blacksmith. Again, this probably is a contentious issue, people complaining about whales being able to superpower things. But if you're a whale, you can just keep buying the packs until you get the gear, and eventually you will get the gear piece that you want. I would have liked some sort of in-game blacksmith maybe in the future where, especially if there's more gear coming out, where you can maybe equip and change the modifier stats onto it. So, a battle axe, maybe there's might and something else that you could use it, like a defense ability or a plus army thing, and you could kind of like tweak with your stats and, not so that you can make a battle axe a focus weapon or something, not something that crazy, but maybe it has a few different abilities and you could modify and change them using some sort of blacksmithing game. And the ability at the bottom, sort of like the melee might, where you just randomly get one of the 3, also would have been nice to be able to maybe select which one. Maybe when you've got a gear item that's got that ability, then it unlocks for that weapon, and then you can remodify and change that weapon to have that ability and things like that. I don't know, it would be, there's more features that could be involved with the items that I would like them to develop and pursue for sure. Useful counter units. I always complain about this. This is one of my biggest issues, that for me, I'm coming against a lot of mounted armies now. All the Gondor and Rohan players, they're just maxed mounted units, and I'm like, okay, so the counter unit for that is Guard of the Tower, but they are rubbish at base level. Okay, they are a tank build, but what's the point in making a counter unit being a tank unit? That doesn't make sense to me. Okay, the tank unit, it deliberately has poor DPS damage output. So giving me a bonus on something that's so weak is irrelevant because I'm still not doing anything. I need my bonus to be on my damage dealers so that my damage dealers are doing a ridiculous amount of damage is increased. So for me, master throws aren't too bad. Okay, it's only plus 20% damage versus melee. If you can get them against something that's larger melee, then that damage becomes crazy. I know a lot of people don't like them because of the random factor. You cannot definitely assure the fact that you're going to go into battle and produce some damage outputs. You might end up being unlucky and pumping out low numbers, although there is that really cool item that potentially allows master throwers double chances of throwing, things like that. Anyway, Guard of the Tower for me are just too fragile, and I don't really like Dunedain. I mean, they're not terrible. They do some good damage out, but I've seen them used ruthlessly because of that prioritizing range units. Means that they do at least do their damage output, but they generally tend to die. So you've got a counter unit that's pretty weak and vulnerable, but at least it is a DPS unit. So I would like to see more. Definitely something for counter mounted. There's just so little out there at the moment. There are so many mounted armies out there, and there is not a whole way of being able to unit counter them. You have to kind of use abilities and commander to get the counters on. Next up, an actual endgame. I probably should have put this earlier. For me, this is more important, but having the season pass and it ends sort of like, I don't know, maybe about 3 or 4 weeks ago or something daft, and there's just been nothing to do. They could give you faction aims to it, or fellowship aims, or personal aims to be, capture certain locations, or kill certain amount of units, or destroy bases, or forts, or fortresses. There could be any sort of list of random weekly thing, but the end game in this game seems to be capture the ring and then hold territories. But I don't know if your server's been like our server, but it's just been trench warfare, and that's going to be one of my later issues. It's been trench warfare for the last 3 or 4 weeks. It's been really dull. It's been really boring. A lot of people have quit the game. A lot of people have just been ground into this tiresome fort building exercise of, I've got 1,000 forts, you've got 1,000 forts, and you guys just going to have to, really focus to be able to siege their way through, and 20-day battles at certain front lines. And it's just been tedious. There needs to be more endgame content. There needs to be more missions to do. As like I said, you could even have everything, faction names and fellowship aims and personal aims. It can be, for a week, or even if it's just for the extra 3 weeks or so after the server progression finishes, to give people content and things to get into. That's really important. I don't know how many people have dropped out of our server, but I suspect it's a lot in the last 3 or 4 weeks of having nothing to do. So yeah, the counter to this is that the game devs need to have the next season planned and prepared, ready for when servers finish as well. Because our server, I know a lot of servers have been the same way for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and there's not been a lot of things for anybody to really do, and it is a problem. It either needs to be a fast reload into the next season, or there needs to be more content for people to get involved towards the end. Reworking the rewards would definitely have a positive effect, because those daily surprise stuffs, when I click on that and I get some tiny amount of gold or 5,000 wood or something, and I'm like, seriously, you're going to give me my daily reward when I log on is 5,000 wood, when my production of wood is, 106,000 per hour. So you've given me 5,000. So you've given me about 3 minutes worth of extra wood. Thank you, but no thank you. I just would rather not have a reward than be given the disappointment of clicking that button and getting rubbish. They could be something a little bit more useful, even if it's just like a small speed ups, or I know you can get like 50 gems and things like that. That's better. It's not great, 50 gems or a 5-minute speed up, but it's going to be potentially used more than 5,000 would be. Also, for me, things like the Matham chest, and I know a lot of people don't like the fact that 0.1% for a tier 3 invitation letter is so low, and that some people might look out and get 3 or 4, and other people might, not get anything for a long time. I am nowhere near a tier 3, and I don't know, I probably spent about $200 or so on Mathams and bits, and I'm still nowhere near. I suspect it will be season 4 before I even get one of these guys unlocked. Let's have a look at my tips. So you can see I'm nowhere near at all. And yeah, she's like, what's that? About a third. Just over a third of the way there. So yeah, by current rates, I would get to see her in season 3 or 4. And you have to remember then at that stage that they're just still unlocked and they're only at level 1. So they're going to compare to all of your tier 2 commanders, which are going to be useful by then, which I imagine by season 3 or 4 would be level 10s or 11s. And they're going to have way more skill points, and they're going to be into tier 5s, and they're just going to be the respect 5s. These are going to be, just super high. So why am I going to use like some tier 1 character here when I've got like these guys at 10 or these guys at like 15 or something? Just doesn't make any sense. The character, just having them unlocked, isn't the end game of having that character anyway. You still have to go through the process of leveling it up, which is difficult. So it's punishing and a bit ridiculous to have a situation where people are nowhere near getting anything by the end of season 1 of a whole variety of characters. That's just adding content into your game that's not just locked behind a paywall because of the probabilities, but it's locked behind a wall where you're going to end up with such a tiny amount of the player base even having access to this, that it's just kind of pointless. You've got this content in there that nobody really can play with, all these skills, all these abilities, all these units, but the majority of the game just can't do anything with it. So Yeah, I feel like maybe even every 10 Matham chests it increases your chance of getting a tier 3 invitation by, and it can even be something like plus 0.01%, but just any sort of, chance of increase of every time I open my Mathams, maybe next time I've got a better chance of getting an invitation letter up to some stage. It would be something at least. The last thing is easier ways to siege, and again, the end game has just got terrible with siege wars, and if I go onto my map, it's just obscene the amount of siege wars that the game has just come to. So just all the way around the ring, what is the plan? Well, the plan is we just build hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and outside we just build more forts, and we just have more forts, and it's just, this is the game. The end game is I have 500 forts, can you destroy all of my forts? And then before this, the same battle was going on in Undeeps. Eventually, of course, they cracked through after sort of like 12 days, and it was just fort line after fort line after fort line, all the way down to here of sort of like 10 deep fort all the way across. And then before that, it was like a trench warfare here at the end of Undeeps. And that has basically been the last 3 weeks of our game. It's been a week of trench war here, so like a week of trench war here, and then it was like 4 or 5 days of trench war here. And it's not been fun. It's not been exciting. It's been a real drain. And I feel that part of that is the problem about trying to destroy forts, especially if you don't have control of that region, or if you're working together as 2 or 3 factions together against one faction. Only one of you can have claim control of that area. The other 2 still have that problem, which then means that half the time you're not going to have siege up, so you are at minus 70% debuff. So these forts just become really problematic to get rid of, especially if you are good factions, because we just don't have good siege at all. There's very few good siege units, and we've got like one okay-ish siege commander who's +1 at what maximum +7 per unit as his ability. It's devastating. You just can't do. You can't do this effectively. All of our battle lines were only destroyed because of the fact that Mordor was one of the groups, and they could come through and siege, a whole load of forts, even without the siege, even with the siege debuff. But they went to war, and they could smash their way through a lot of the forts. Good factions just cannot do that, and that is a massive pain going forward. I would like to see good factions have better siege units. I'd like to see even just siege specific units. It can have a huge amount of siege value and nothing else. So you're capped by the barracks. So if you choose to make siege armies, then your barrack size, you're going to be taking from them from that space, and they're not going to be very useful apart from anything other than, and give them like twice the siege value. Make it so that you can kill forts in, level 5 or 6 forts in a few hits, but you have to have these armies that are designed only for siege, and they can't do anything else. My other idea would be to have super siege units, things that can attack, and when they attack, they damage things in a 2x2 tile area, or like some sort of like catapult shot that goes in a line and damages everything, like in a 3 tile block or something, only against empty forts. And really involve a siege element to this, where you can bring siege units to the battle. They do huge damages against forts, but they're just not good against armies. There we go. Those are some things that I hope maybe could make the game better in the future. If you have your own ideas, if you agree or disagree with me, comment, let me know. If there's other ideas that you would like to see, maybe post them in. If there's a whole load of really good ideas, maybe I'll make a part 2 for this video of the viewers' wish list for future seasons, if there's enough good ideas. Thanks for watching as always, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.